Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. A few days ago, I did a video talking about some of my favorite baits for fishing outside weed lines, and I had a few viewers reach out to me and ask if the baits that I like to use on the inside weed line is the same as the ones that I like to use for outside weed lines. And the reality is they're not all the same. Now, obviously, you can still use the baits that you fish on the outside weed line on the inside weed line, but because the inside weed line is significantly shallower, my bait choice does change. And for those of you that aren't familiar, outside weed line is literally talking about where the weeds grow to the point where they stop as the water gets deeper. The inside weed line acts the same way. Most different types of grass that grows in the lakes have a certain depth they need to be in that they can grow up to, as well as a certain depth that they can grow down to. So a lot of grass will be in a certain depth range. So if, for example, milfoil in most lakes generally starts in that 3.5 foot range and will go out to about 8 foot of water. And that means you can have a very good inside weed line, just like you do on the outside of the grass.
Today's video is brought to you by the Deep Dive app. This has had an amazing new update. As you guys know, I love the water clarity feature. As you can see right here, we're looking at Grand Lake, which just had a whole pile of rain come into it. It went from being really clear to having a lot of dirty water coming in the bottom end of it. Just an amazing feature to be able to determine where the clear water is versus the muddy water. So Deep Dive has just also introduced stream flow. Now this is a really cool feature that shows all of the water input coming into certain reservoirs and the amount of water coming in. So they measure it in cubic feet per second. You can see in this case, this is just a small creek, but then you can see the projected as well as the previous flows. If we move up the lake here, get into one of the larger rivers coming in, you can see here that we've got 490 cubic feet per second. And then it shows you that there's not much of a change expected. Now, if there's some rainfall coming, I'm sure those projections will change. If we scoot on over here to take a look at Kentucky Lake and Barkley Lake, much larger river systems, the Tennessee River, you can see what the projected outflow is going to be there, 28,000 cubic feet per second. Go check the Cumberland River here. We got 9.4 thousand cubic feet per second. Just an amazing feature that allows you to see all of the different water flows coming into the different parts of the lake. You can see which ones might be the most affected, which ones won't be affected, see what the projected outflow schedules are. A major feature to help you catch more fish. And that's on top of some of the other new features like the wind effects. Now, the wind effects is really cool because we've had wind effects as part of the app in the past, but all it did is show where the wind was hitting the shoreline the most, as you can see from the dots, the orange and bright red dots, which indicate where the wind is really striking. But now the wind feature also indicates what the wave action is like on the lake itself. So some of the features you're going to get from this is determining where to get from place to place safely by avoiding the heavy, rough water conditions. You'll be able to determine where you may have some of the strongest current flow and some of the places where you can fish to stay protected. Now, along with that, you still have some of my favorite features like the patterns that you've got on the lake that indicate the best baits and lures to fish with. You've also got the water inflow app, which shows you where a bunch of the rain input comes in. That can be an amazing pattern to fish throughout the year. Just a great feature to have. So many positive features anytime you're fishing or using the Deep Dive app. Just points you in the right direction to catch more fish. Whether you're a tournament angler or a local fun fisherman that's just out to catch a few fish, the Deep Dive app will help you catch more fish next time you're out on the water.
Now, because you do have a different depth range, that does change my bait choice quite a bit. So I want to go over some of my favorite baits for fishing the inside weed line, which oftentimes is less pressured than the outside weed line and can be very, very good, especially early in the summer as well as late in the summer. So actually early fall is what I would call it. A lot of times your fish start moving shallower in the fall, and a lot of times your fish are still shallower in the early part of the summer because the deeper grass has not fully been established. So I really like fishing the inside weed line early summer as well. Now, I've got some really good baits here, and keep in mind that generally speaking, your inside weed line, I'm going to say, is going to be 4 foot of water or less. Most lakes that have a lot of grass in it don't have grass that go from the bank out. And a lot of lakes, you'll see that, a couple of foot of water is generally pretty bare. It could be a sand bottom, could be a rock bottom. And from that standpoint, you're going to be looking for some of those isolated pieces of cover on the inside weed line, just like on the outside weed line. So maybe you're going to have a point. Maybe you've got a stretch of grass where you've got a point that comes off the shore. So you actually have like an inside bend in the grass line. Maybe you've got areas where you've got some hard rock that meets the grass line. Maybe you've got a lay down tree that falls from the shoreline and falls into where the inside weed line is. Those are all very, very high percentage spots. Now, some of my favorite things to be throwing in this range has to be some of your finesse baits again. So just like we talked about on the outside weed line, your wacky rigs are going to be dynamite. Weightless wacky rigs or extremely lightly weighted wacky rigs. This is just the Berkeley Maxcent the General. I've got this. This is a really good color that I love. It's the black tip on the green pumpkin, and I've got it on the 1/28 ounce core tackle weedless wacky shot. Just a dynamite bait for throwing to your inside weed lines. Cannot go wrong with a wacky rig. Now, another finesse bait that I really like and have had a ton of success with since we came out with it is the core tackle hover rig. I like to throw like the 3/64 ounce size, and I'll throw it on either a minnow style bait or a worm style bait. And I'll just let that bait glide along that inside weed line, generates a ton of strikes. Something like the hover tricks will work really well as well. The key here is you just want a bait that's a slow fall, has some motion, has some gliding movement, and can generate some of those reaction strikes. So the core tackle hover rig is another one I've had great success with. Now, those are kind of my finesse baits. Because you're talking about a lot less water, I feel like your reaction baits become much more efficient during this range versus the outside weed line where you might be fishing 20 foot of water and it's just hard to really continuously make cast after cast after cast that's effective and efficient because it's hard to know where you need to be casting. A lot of your casts are waste at that point, and your moving baits are still very good, but they're better on the inside weed line, in my opinion. So one of my absolute favorites is a frog. It's hard not to have a hollow belly frog. This is the Berkeley Swamp Lord. So if you're talking about fishing that inside weed line, in my opinion, frogs excel when you're in like 3 foot of water or less because that fish only can be 3 feet away from that bait. So it's hard for them not to know it's there. They have to expel less energy to get the frog. And if you're talking about shallow grass, your frog is going to be one of your best baits, especially because a lot of your areas too, like I mentioned before, you might have some stumps or some wood that comes into play, and a hollow belly is just one of the most weedless baits around. So this is a very, very good bait to have on inside weed lines. Now, another one that I really love is your swim jig. I love bluegill colored swim jigs. So this is a core tackle swim jig with a reaction innovation boot tail. It's just their skinny dipper on the back. I love a bluegill colored swim jig for your inside weed lines because you can clip the grass, you can rip it out, you can create a lot of erratic movement. And a lot of times the bluegill beds are right on the inside of the grass line. So if you've got a lot of bluegill around, a lot of bluegill beds, you're going to have bass around. And a swim jig is one of the best baits for fishing through that grass efficiently and generate a lot of strikes. Now, another one that I love to throw is a buzzbait. It's a Picasso toad slayer. So on the back of this, you could put, any of your buzzer style baits. This is the Berkeley Buzz and Speed toad. You could put a Zoom horny toad. You could put pretty much anything you want. I like to throw a Berkeley Pit Boss on the back. You could put a boot tail swim bait on the back. But here the point is, again, you can run a buzz bait along that inside weed line, generate a lot of strikes, cover a lot of water, and the buzz bait tends to come through grass clippings and come through that grass better than a lot of your other topwater baits, which tend to get caught if they've got treble hooks. Buzzbait's really good for coming over the top of some good grass And you also have to keep in mind a lot of times between the inside weed line and the shoreline, you have a lot of floating debris as well. You get a lot of grass clippings that kind of get caught in that range, and therefore a lot of your baits aren't going to come through it really, really clean. So you're not going to be as efficient as you need to be. But these 5 baits, if I'm going out to fish inside weed lines, are going to be some of my absolute killers. Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind too is anytime you're fishing the inside weed line, your eyes are really important. A lot of times you can actually see the fish running that inside line. So it's important to note where you see the fish, and sometimes you may not get them to bite the first time around, but if you come back and you already know the zone they're in, those fish will usually still be there and you can attack them from a little bit further away and a lot of times get them to bite. So hopefully these tips were helpful. I love inside weed lines and I think they often go very under pressured. So give them a try, grab some of these baits. I'll put links to Tackle Warehouse in my video description if you want to support the channel. And stay tuned. We'll have a new video coming out tomorrow for you.